You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. It is great to be with you, although we have to start with a completely different story than we were planning on covering, a situation developing in the Caribbean due to a number of sources. Right now, it is suspected that the United States is planning a major military operation in the Caribbean in conjunction with the United States Air Force, the United States Navy, and the Central Intelligence Agency, according to a series of leaks. So first and foremost, there are flight radar images, and I think that we can get these put up on screen for those who are watching. A series of, I believe, 3 B-52s have been spotted with the moniker Bunny on flight radar, essentially squawking with their transponders over the southern Caribbean right off the coast of Venezuela. They're making some interesting turns. I'm not going to give you the air traffic control analysis of these particular patterns, but they're a bit unusual. They're also not accompanied by any craft that are also squawking. So as a private pilot, I will tell you that when you are in the air, after you avoid the jerk who tried to land when you were taking off at Henry County Airport in your fancy little private jet, you jerk. After you get done dealing with those people, you're supposed to squawk. You get on the transponder on the radio, and as though you're Smokey and the Bandit, you let the nearest tower of your regional airspace know you're here, you're flying, you're having a great time because the FAA does not allow you to fly sad, and you are the airplane in this airspace. And then flight radar tracks private, commercial, military flights of certain monikers. Well, B-52s don't fly alone, boys and girls, and so I would pose a guess that there are either F-22s or F-35s, perhaps some global Hawk drones that are, at least in the general vicinity, providing cover for these B-52 Stratofortress bombers. Now, this brings us to Trump being asked directly about this following a leak from the New York Times. So the Trump administration has secretly authorized the CIA, I guess as opposed to publicly authorizing the CIA. Sorry, the way that people write news stories gives me the giggles. To conduct covert actions, including lethal operations, in the southern Caribbean and Venezuela as part of the latest step in the administration's intensifying pressure campaign against narco-terrorists in the region and the Venezuelan government under Nicolas Maduro, the socialist dictator. This is according to the New York Times, saying that these are senior officials who spoke with him. That's a journalist's way of saying it could be anybody. Everyone's a senior official. You know, private janitor who mops with the wrong end of the mop down the east hallway could be a senior official to the New York Times. Now, that presents a whole other list of problems. But first, the president's response to this. I want to make sure that we get you this as quick as possible because, God forbid, there could be other news that breaks in the meantime.
Why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? And is there more information you can share about these strikes on the alleged...
Well, I can't do that, but I authorized for 2 reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. They came in through the... they came in through the border. They came in because we had an open border policy. And as soon as I heard that, I said, a lot of these countries, they're not the only country, but they're the worst abuser. And they've entered they've allowed thousands and thousands of prisoners, mental institution, people from mental institutions, insane asylums, emptied out into the United States. We're bringing them back. But that's a really bad, and they did it at a level that probably not, many countries have done it, but not like Venezuela. They were down and dirty. And the other thing are drugs. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela.
It is true that the narco-terrorism originating from Venezuela has been a primary agitator, not only against the kind of the distribution of drugs and paraphernalia in the United States, but also as a method of facilitating human trafficking, narco-terrorism, and the establishment of foreign operators in the United States. There is also sufficient evidence that suggests who is Venezuela working with internationally in order to accomplish some of these goals? China. All of Trump's actions in the South American continent, in the Caribbean right now, are all due to China. And you can call it a trade war, you can call it kind of a Cold War, you can call it this escalation of power. Right now, this is not in the Middle East. It's not in the South China Sea. It is all about the South Caribbean and the South American continent. And by the way, Trump does, in the same press conference a little bit later, acknowledge that, yeah, we're in the middle of a trade war with Beijing.
Are we in for a sustained trade war with China?
Well, you're in one now. Look, we have 100% tariff. If we didn't have tariffs, we would be exposed as being a nothing. We would have no defense. You know, they've used tariffs on us, but we've never had anybody sitting in that chair that felt the need to do it. And
it is a serious thing to consider, the national security implications of leaving China unchecked on the economic frontier, of course, as well as the narco-terror sphere. Now, this brings us to other questions from reporters to the president on what actions the president did or did not authorize related to the CIA.
On Venezuelan boats, I want to ask you, why not have the Coast Guard stop them, which it is empowered by law to do? You know, this way you can confirm who's on the boat and ensure that they're doing what you suspect.
Because we've been doing that for 30 years, and it has been totally ineffective. They have faster boats. Some of these boats are seriously, I mean, they're world-class speedboats, but they're not faster than missiles. But we've been trying to do that for years, and so much of the drugs, 25-30%, would come in through the seas. Right now we have, I would say, none coming in through the seas. In fact, I don't know about the fishing industry. If you want to go fishing, a lot of people aren't deciding to even go fishing. We've almost totally stopped it by sea. Now we'll stop it by land.
What's the next
But
step?
it never worked. It never worked when you did it in a very politically correct manner.
So it's not quite clear if Trump saying this is kind of a Freudian slip, or if he's, kind of if by land, if by sea, kind of the comparison. Originally, the idea was that the Coast Guard of the United States Navy or a different government would intercept a narco-terrorist boat and seize it, stop it, say, halt, and then catch the boat before it gets to the United States or before it gets to an intermediary vessel, and then land in Mexico off the Yucatan, land on a halfway stop around Cuba. There's really a lot of places that those boats do end up disappearing to. And so what the Trump administration is suggesting is, instead of letting those boats come to the United States or wherever, Narnia, who knows, we see them off the coast of Venezuela, and then the boats aren't there anymore. They're promoted to submarine. And I think that realistically, that's a Monroe Doctrine that is far more effective because things aren't slipping through. If you're keeping an eye on the Venezuelan coast and these ports, which there's sufficient evidence to suggest that the United States may be preparing to target ports in Venezuela, where a lot of these narco-terrorist boats are emanating from, which, just to make this clear, that is absolutely the correct response by this administration. This is exactly what I voted for. Solving the problem at the source, instead of this hiding here behind our borders and if they get here, we'll do something. You want to take out an infection, you don't just slap a Band-Aid over the wound. And this is excellent work by the Secretary of War and, of course, the President of the United States. Now, the last question comes to the president authorizing perhaps a bombing campaign on said ports and maybe Venezuela proper. Very big question for a number of reasons. Here's the reporter and the president.
And he's assured me there will be no oil purchased from Russia. I don't know, maybe that's a break.
Sorry, that's the wrong clip. That's the president of the United States saying that Prime Minister Bodie no longer agrees to buy any oil from Russia, which is the other half of the coin, because if the Trump administration is going to economically box out China with soybeans in Argentina, he has to box out Russia with oil. The president did also confirm that the United States might bomb Venezuela. We might not. Who knows? Time will tell. how Trump says these kinds of things, usually right before the United States Operation Midnight Hammers a Fool. We'll let the radio crew head over to commercial. We'll continue on the live stream with more breaking news coverage. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, this brings us to a bit of the upcoming scuttle, the ongoing scuttle, I should say, scuffle between the Pentagon administration and the press corps. So right now, every press agency and their brother, except for One America News, has been given a series of requests, a pact to sign by the Pentagon, by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth says that the three terms are, number one, no more press wandering the halls like unsupervised children of the Pentagon. Number two, they have to wear a press badge at all times. And number three, and may I say most importantly in this, because it's kind of the most vague, members of the press are not allowed to solicit illegal activity in the Pentagon. Now, this doesn't mean, soliciting a good time in stall 3. That's solely reserved for staffers in the United States Senate. The Pentagon, essentially, there's two arguments to this. So depending on how the pact is essentially set up, I talked about this with our editor-in-chief, Kate Page, earlier today. If the pact given to press says that you can't ask national security staff or members of the Pentagon to divulge secrets like the CIA in covert operations inside Venezuela, New York Times, well, then that would mean no more big, huge leaks putting U.S. servicemen and allies at risk. Which, by the way, I thought the New York Times was all in favor of keeping U.S. allies safe and not getting hurt if they leak information ahead of time. Remember this unsecure signal chat that Jeffrey Goldberg had from The Atlantic? Oh, it could have gotten U.S. service members killed, yet they're the ones participating in major leaking operations. However, in the defense of the press organizations, and I have to frame both sides of this because I haven't seen the pact in question. Here's the other side of this. If it's really vague and it says you promise not to ask the wrong kinds of questions, well, then I could be in legal hot water. Let's say, just for example, I'm going to make up a hypothetical here. Let's say there is some kind of terrorist attack, God forbid, in Greenland against a U.S. base there, and that in the terrorist backpack, there's a Danish flag. And so if I'm a reporter in the Pentagon, I might ask, hey, is there any kind of procedures the United States has in place if a Western European nation who's supposed to be friendly to us commits an act of terrorism? And if the United States does in fact have those kind of plans, and I don't know about it, have I just unknowingly asked a national security staffer to violate the law, even if I had no idea what I was asking? I just happened to hop across the right place at the right time, like in a FOIA request. Well, this is why the document needs to be very clear. It's really unclear at this point whether or not the Secretary of War wanted to essentially just set up some guidelines or wanted news organizations to seek approval for all of the output of information. And according to producer Daniel and Nick, who are sending me some updated info on this, there's an approval of release for all information. So, okay, it looks like the Pentagon, quote, information must be approved for public release by an appropriate authorizing official before it's released. Even if it's unclassified, failure to abide by these rules may result in suspension or revocation of your building pass and loss of access. Yeah, it's a bit of a problem because then you can run into essentially covering up for PR nightmares by just calling it a national security risk. Yeah, that's a bit of an issue. You know, if Petraeus is out there humping anything that moves, as he once did in his personal life, and someone reports on that, does that have to be approved by the Pentagon? Yeah, that could be an issue. Producer Nick?
Well, inherently, the restriction of certain informations creates a bias in reporting, which is why many of the news organizations are citing it, that specific issue as the reason why they're leaving the Pentagon.
Two things can be true at once. The press doesn't need to be leaking national security secrets just to get clicks on the website. And number two, yeah, the Pentagon shouldn't be approving every single thing a presser in the Pentagon writes. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. More breaking news to follow. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. We'll continue to monitor the situation in the Caribbean and Venezuela. Right now, there is a major issue with federal judges in the United States once again throwing their hat into the ring and saying the Trump administration can't do things that not only has the Constitution outlined clearly in Article 2, not only has legal precedent in the United States confirmed, for example, in cases of a government shutdown, what the Office of Management and Budget under the Office of the President can do, but also the Supreme Court this ding-dang-dong year has already stated explicitly the President has the plenary authority to do fire federal workforce because constitutional provision illustrates this completely. Now, U.S. District Judge Susan Ilston has ruled that the administration isn't following the legal requirements for conducting reductions in force. So according to Politico, a federal judge on Wednesday blocked the Trump administration from laying off thousands of federal workers during the government shutdown, saying that it appears to be politically motivated. Now, who is U.S. District Judge Susan Ilston? Well, she's a Clinton appointee based in California, and said that because the Trump administration is trying to use the reductions in force by the Office of Management of Budget and Management, essentially now that she's making the claim that officials have exceeded their authorities because Trump had made public comments about the shutdown, saying that the layoffs appear to be unlawfully targeted at Democrats. So first of all, no. Second of all, not in her purview to say. And number three, there's not anything specifically in the U.S. District Court level judicial framework that suggests that she can stop this. And not just because there's nothing in federal law that suggests, or even in federal precedent that suggests that she can intervene here on behalf of Democrats just out of nowhere because the president's a Republican. No. Number two, and I would say most importantly here, the Supreme Court just got done issuing a ruling. How do I know? Because Ketanji Brown Jackson had a hiccuping fit and scrawled angry texts on her papyrus with Crayola in her dissent. This is not going to stand. If it's not tossed aside by an appeals court within 3 days, I will be deeply surprised. But wait, Susan Ilston's not done. There are memos which suggest Susan Ilston might also be getting ready to intervene because the Trump administration at the federal level is now trying to work through back channels to pay the troops during the shutdown. They're suggesting that Ilston might be ready to swoop in and say the Trump administration can't use money already available in coffers for the federal government to spend to give U.S. troops money. Why? Because she's not getting her paycheck as a federal judge? Because Democrat congressmen and women aren't getting their paychecks right now? Because someone might have decided that the office of fat people is no longer necessary at the Naval Assistance Office? What's the issue here?
It becomes harder to justify the continuation of the lockdown when, there becomes less of a need to not have it locked down.
I mean, again, lockdown or no lockdown here, there's just precedent that's already in place for this. And if you think that as a Democrat, taking the side against U.S. troops being paid is the maneuver here, you are just the dumbest person on planet Earth. And why is all of this happen? Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, has gone on the record gleefully cheering that he is going to get judges that he made sure got confirmed, that Democrat judges are going to do everything they can to thwart the Trump administration. Again, I'm not just saying that. He's the one who has argued that federal judges need to be weaponized in a judicial insurrection. Here's Chuck Schumer.
There are those who believe that we are in real time living through an assault on the constitutional order. Do you believe that we are in a constitutional crisis right now?
Yes, our democracy is at risk because Donald Trump shows that he wishes to violate the laws in many, many different ways. The good news here is we did put 235 judges progressive judges, judges not under the control of Trump last year on the bench, and they are ruling against Trump time after time after time. And we hope that the appellate courts, when it gets up there in the Supreme Court, will uphold those rulings.
They're not.
They restored the money to NIH.
They didn't.
They required that 8,000 federal employees have to come back.
They did not. They ended up all getting canned, and there was a very sweet but sorrowful goodbye.
We're in over 100 lawsuits against them, and we are having a good deal of success. It's only at the lower court level right now.
So he gets out there and brags. We are absolutely using a judicial measure in not a nonpartisan fashion, not with the Lady Justice being blind, as she's depicted in murals and statues, but essentially Chuck doesn't like Donald Trump. And so then the judges swoop in, and even on things the SCOTUS have already ruled in favor of weeks ago. I mean, you hear Democrats, get out the pearls and start freaking out, clutching pearls over, oh, it's unprecedented, it's unprecedented. Making a ruling as a federal level, just a district level judge, right after SCOTUS has ruled the opposite is, there's like stupid bravery, like Florida man wrestles alligator because he thought he could do it level stupid bravery. That's what this is. It's courage that emanates from the part of the brain that resides in the butt. So speaking of brains that resides in butts, Kendra Briggs, the associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, a Biden-appointed judge, because, of course, has announced there will be no jail time given to the teenagers, by which we mean like older teenagers, responsible for brutally attacking the Doge employee known as Big Balls. So we can't show the picture here because then YouTube and our other streaming services would get very, very grumpy. One of the Doge accountants looking through pieces of data and essentially just saying, hey, this might be cut because maybe we shouldn't be doing transgender line dancing in Colombia on the taxpayer dime. There were a group of teenagers in Washington, D.C. who assaulted him and beat the living crap out of him. And then the Democrats threw a fit because, again, when Republicans get violently assaulted, we need to start considering communities and understanding and all other kinds of nonsense. And by the way, why did Big Balls rush in that particular instance and end up getting in why was he involved in this mugging? Oh, he tried to stop those thugs from assaulting a lady. So this kid gets involved, tries to save somebody's life. He gets beaten up for it, and then the judge lets the teens out, on probation, because Judge Briggs stated her goal is to rehabilitate, not to punish. Restorative justice is a disease. I saw this in the school systems, where you would have a student beat the living crap out of another in Lawrence North in Indianapolis. And I would recommend, when I was writing up the student, this student should be expelled because they have beaten a student within an inch of their life. And this one counselor would essentially freak out and wail like she stubbed her toe on a car battery. Oh, it's not restorative enough. Oh, you're dooming him to the prison pipeline. Well, maybe if he didn't do things that should get him in prison, come on. So that brings us to one last bit of judge shenanigans now from Chicago. Radio crew, we got to send you over to commercial those darned FCC guidelines. We'll continue on the live stream because YouTube ain't under the FCC. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We'll continue on Rumble and X as well. So in Cook County, the good old land of Chirac, where dreams come true and people get shot, Cook County Chief Judge Timothy Evans has now said, effective immediately at the direction of Governor Pritzker, Immigration Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol agents are heretofore barred from making arrests of illegal aliens at Chicago courts or on the city of Chicago court property. Here's the news coverage clip of this at least.
Cook County Circuit Chief Judge Timothy Evans is barring civil arrests of people when they are at county courts. Evans said in a statement, quote, access to justice depends on every individual's ability to appear in court without fear or obstruction. Our courthouses remain places where all people, regardless of their background or circumstance, should be able to safely and confidently participate in the judicial process.
That is insane. I want to go back to one particular thing that she said.
Justice depends on every individual's ability to appear in court without fear or obstruction.
Without fear or obstruction, every person's ability to appear in court. So if you commit a particular crime like entering this country illegally, you don't have apparently the right to go into federal court for violating federal law. Instead, you have to go to whatever your little courthouse summons is in Illinois, which I can only guess is like awkwardly stepping on one of the pride flags painted on the street. Because access to justice means everybody. Do you realize the insanity of this particular decision? I mean, forget the insurrection from Hefferson Davis in this particular instance. And this is, in fact, the means of which the Trump administration can and should bring in the Insurrection Act and the National Guard. Because now you have the governor of Illinois and judges in the city of Chicago, in Cook County, who are now saying federal agents no longer have the authority to uphold federal law. They're saying federal agents keep out of these places. Now, there was a place in South Carolina in which the state said federal officials were required to leave immediately because that was South Carolinian jurisdiction. And it kind of kicked off a little shindig called the Civil War. That's insurrection. Sorry. Far more insurrection-y than a grandmother taking photos inside Statue Hall, just for the record. But alas, to get back to the point of the matter here, J.B. Pritzker is playing a very, very dangerous game because essentially now if you're just on court property, then federal officials can't come in and make an arrest. Now they're saying there's no civil penalties levied, but if you're an illegal immigrant that's wanted for, human trafficking or rape or beating your wife with your MS-13 tattooed knuckles, shout out to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, they can still end up coming in to arrest you. They absolutely will. Here's J.B. Pritzker, though, in reporter garb, because Jimmy Kimmel, he wants to get tough.
We also got a very special report filed by J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois.
This is J.B. Pritzker reporting from war-torn Chicago. As you can see, there's utter mayhem and chaos on the ground. It's quite disturbing. The Milwaukee Brewers have come in to attack our Chicago Cubs. We've seen people being forced to eat hot dogs with ketchup on them. And our deep dish pizza, has gone shallow. So it's a challenge to survive here in the city of Chicago, but there's no hellscape that I'd rather be in.
Well, thank you, Governor. And please know that you and the Cubs.
Okay, so I know I had to show you guys that clip because no one's watching Jimmy Kimmel. So you're welcome, ABC, for the additional viewership. But we have to head back to pick up the radio crew from commercial. We got a lot on media stuff to cover. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Do not go anywhere.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
So, J.B. Pritzker, just as a little side note here, while he's inciting insurrection and ordering that people can't be arrested by federal law enforcement on certain Illinois-owned or Chicago-owned property, again, not something that he can do, not something that judge can order. That's not a thing. You don't just get to declare bankruptcy like Michael Scott yelling into the breeze. But it should be noted that 4 servicemen had to give up their plate carrier so that someone could stitch together a quilt of bulletproof vest big enough for J.B. Pritzker to wear. So for those of you out there without chest protection right now, we appreciate your service. And God be with the ceramic that was most certainly warped after J.B. Pritzker took it off to give it back to you. Now, on some of the other media news at the moment, other than Jimmy Kimmel, nobody tuning into his show, NBC News has now laid off 150 people. Now, producer Nick, do you know why NBC is laying off people? I'll tell you. I'm not even going to wait for you to respond into the microphone. No one's watching NBC. No one. No one's tuning in to NBC. Not even your local Applebee's, when it's serving frozen food purchased from Kroger, is turning on NBC News. I don't think anyone's actually cared about NBC News since they changed the music intro theme back in 2003. You know, the one back when it was like, like the NBC theme. It's a wild show on the Tony Kinnett Cast this evening. Here's the fun part. The 150 layoffs at NBC News, according to The Wrap, are getting rid of Black, Latino, boy, the Latinx thing didn't last very long, Black, Latino, Asian American, and LGBTQ plus diversity teams. The verticals focused on Black, Latino, Asian American, and LGBTQ plus groups will remain, but they come amid a broader shift in media away from diversity efforts. The Asian American team at NBC News, what were you covering? Because the only things that can really come to mind are either the string of crimes against Asian Americans in New York City that were not reported by NBC. I know because I checked. Remember the whole Stop Asian Hate campaign during COVID, where they suggested that white people were apparently out in droves attacking Asian Americans? And then it turned out that the only crimes against Asian Americans in this country were not from people who said China's responsible for the COVID-19 virus. They were from Harvard University not letting Asians in because they were too smart or something. And number two, from Black Americans in New York City. And NBC didn't report on that. So I don't know what the Asian American diversity crew was busy working on. The LGBTQ diversity team, the Latino diversity team, had a very short-lived time because, again, it was like Latinx or Latinx or whatever offensive term to Hispanic people 5 minutes ago. So a very firm nah, hey, goodbye. Now, there are some left-wing journalists saying that people like us, independent journos and crews of smaller broadcast networks, what we really need to do is hire these people. It's my responsibility to reach out to the NBC crews who didn't give a damn about yours truly when he was being fired from Indianapolis public schools for whistleblowing. My responsibility is to reach out to them now and offer them a job. So if you're an LGBTQ plus diversity producer at NBC News and you've just lost your job, you enjoy the unemployment line before you go, I don't know, what do LGBTQ plus diversity teams do on a Saturday?
Weave baskets.
Weave baskets, as all your college major is good for. In other news, because, news never ends, the Supreme Court has signaled that it is poised to strike down the race-based Voting Rights Act congressional districts that heavily favor Democrats. This is according to the New York Times. This net swing of voting redistricting could be a Republican plus 24 in congressional districts in the U.S. House of Representatives. That's plus 12 Republican districts, minus 12 Democrat districts. Now, here's where things get fun. From SCOTUS, quote, the court's conservative justices have long pointed to what they have viewed as a tension between the Voting Rights Act's goal of protecting minority voting rights and a colorblind conception in the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, which requires that the law treat everyone equally. So essentially, the Voting Rights Act came out and said, you know what? People in this second clause of the Voting Rights Act says that black people in this country would never win elections unless certain states were allowed to draw districts around where black people live, which is like really racially separatist. Essentially saying black people are only ever going to vote for black people and white people are only ever going to vote for the white people. And by the way, that's not me saying that. I bet you thought I was making an example. No, here's the lawyer from the NAACP saying exactly that in oral arguments in the Supreme Court today.
That's right. And in the state of Louisiana, that analysis was conducted in the Nairn case. And it was clear that regardless of party, white Democrats were not voting for black candidates, whether they were Democrats or not. And we know that there is such a significant chasm between how black and white voters vote in Louisiana that there's no question that even if there is some correlation between race and party, that race is the driving factor.
Can you comment on...
Holy crap. In case you missed that, she said that Democrats in Louisiana, that Democrats, if they're white Democrats, would not vote for a black Democrat candidate. Do you know why that's bullcrap? Nick, what's that one election that comes before the general election? What's that called? Can you tell us what it's called? It starts with a P, makes you think of red, yellow, and blue. What's that word?
Primary.
President. Primary elections. So there were enough Democrats to vote for the black candidate in the primary election, but apparently she's saying, according to data, and by the way, she didn't actually provide any kind of sourced data here that shows that there are black Democrats running for office that white Democrats aren't voting for in Louisiana or in other major congressional districts like this in the country. She's suggesting they need the voting districts to be racially segregated because white Democrats aren't voting for black Democrats, which, first of all, if that's true, that's saying the quiet part out loud, that Democrats are apparently racist because...
I'm just confused about our president before Trump's first term.
Well, of course, as you know, Democrats in Louisiana totally voted against Barack Obama. What an excellent... Oh, wait, no. More Democrats turned out in favor in Louisiana for Obama than in the last 3 presidential elections. Like for Al Gore, for example. He got skunked in Louisiana in the Democrat Party there. They all came out in droves, including white Democrats, for Obama. Excellent point. Now, this wouldn't be a great Supreme Court battle without Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson weighing in and saying something extremely insulting, at least this time, to black people. So the woman Biden appointed to the Supreme Court, his words, because he had to appoint a black person and a woman to the Supreme Court. Good Lord. Here is old Ketanji Brown Jackson making the case. Well, here, listen for yourself.
A kind of paradigmatic example of this is something like the ADA. Congress...
The ADA is the American Disabilities Act.
Passed the Americans with Disabilities Act against the backdrop of a world that was generally not accessible to people with disabilities. And
you guys know the ADA that says that, federal buildings need to have a ramp so that people in wheelchairs can get in. And if, let's say, and this is a later argument, but I have ADHD. You never would have guessed, huh? If I apply for a federal position and I meet the requirements, they can't say, sorry, Tony, you bounce around like a rabbit on speed. We're not going to hire you because of that disability, whatever. It's not really disability. It's just an example. That's what the ADA is. We understand this as Americans.
So it was discriminatory in effect because these folks were not able to access these buildings. And it didn't matter whether the person who built the building or the person who owned the building intended for them to be exclusionary. That's irrelevant. Congress said the facilities have to be made equally open to people with disabilities if readily possible.
She's not going to say what I think she's going to say because this is about the Voting Rights Act and like black constructed districts. Like that you should be allowed to draw a black only congressional district.
I guess I don't understand why that's not what's happening here. The idea in Section 2 is that we are responding to current day manifestations of past and present decisions that disadvantage minorities and make it so that they don't have equal access to the voting system, right? They're disabled. In fact,
they're disabled. Who's disabled? Black people. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Ketanji Brown Jackson from the Supreme Court says that black people are disabled. All black people in this country, according to the ADA and the 14th Amendment, are disabled. Yep. Thanks, Ketanji. Oh my good sweet Moses in a basket floating down the Nile. Radio crew will send you to the commercial. Unless Ketanji called you disabled, you can leave the dial right here. I guess now we have to say that. Thanks, Justice Jackson. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. I can't believe she said. I mean, I can believe that she said that because Ketanji has no idea what's going on at all in the Supreme Court or anywhere else for that matter. But good old Ketanji saying that black people don't have access to what? To vote? If you need to racially segregate your voting district, by the way, for those who disagree with me, even on my home station, which I realize we're on commercial break right now, but my home station of Indianapolis, there are several of my colleagues that are very much against redistricting here in the state of Indiana. Guys, the current makeup of the congressional map in Indiana gives Andre Carson his particular voting district along racial lines. It essentially creates a majority black person voting district for Representative Andre Carson. We shouldn't be racially segregating chunks of my home state of Indiana or Georgia or Alabama or Mississippi. And by the way, just for the record here, I want to throw it up on screen. Here is what the map is going to look like after you're not allowed to create Croatia, Eastern European style map drawing, Sykes-Picot agreement voting districts anymore. And essentially then they're based on socioeconomic factors and, people having something in common in a region, like access to the same kinds of industries, living and driving on the same kinds of roads, participating in the same type of political structures. Because, for example, in the Indiana 6th Congressional, right now my congressman is Representative Jefferson Shreve. He is in Columbus and Indianapolis. Columbus, Indiana, the architecture capital of the United States for some reason, because someone was drunk when they were naming cities. They decided that liberalish kind of weird pseudo-industrial area and in Indianapolis had the same things in common with Eastern Central Indiana, which is a rural, former Rust Belt manufacturing, kind of like from Richmond west. Again, for those who aren't in Indiana, just a local example here. The insanity of suggesting that I must have more in common with people in Columbus because we're white, rather than people just down the road for me in Cumberland, Indiana, into Indianapolis itself, who live also along US 40, who have a lot of the same socioeconomic conditions, who have a lot of the same corporations that ran manufacturing that we worked for, the same school districts. That's asinine. Redistricting is necessary. And also, may I just say a hearty cry about it. We're playing politics. That's the name of the game. So the Supreme Court situation is not only getting better on the side for Republicans because of, right now it looks like the Supreme Court's going to rule on redistricting. The country's opinion is really starting to shift towards Republicans on the congressional kind of shutdown advocacy sphere. And the guy who's made this point the clearest is Harry Enton. And of course, this comes down to none other than Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, who's taken up what can either be described as a rejected 90s R&B artist, Bone Thugs and Disharmony, or Dr. Seuss on meth. We'll talk about it in a second. Don't go anywhere. Got to pick up the radio crew from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
The Democrats in Congress right now, amidst all of the breaking news regarding Venezuela, amid the major legal battles, the judicial insurrection, they have decided to throw all of their efforts behind a bunch of weird rhymes, Pelosi screaming at reporters again, and then, of course, holding a little women's march with vagina hats to Speaker Mike Johnson's office. So first of all, Hakeem Jeffries and his incredible new lyrical career.
House Republicans shut the government down. Then they ran out of town. And for the last 3 weeks, they're nowhere to be found.
Thank you very much, Hakeem Jeffries. I too enjoy great works of literature. So Ketanji Brown Jackson, I joked earlier, has the reading level of a Dr. Seuss book. Hakeem Jeffries is just straight up pulling Fox in socks for some speaking ideas. Socks on Knox and Knox in box. Washington's closed. Thank you, Hakeem Jeffries. That was really wonderful. So moving right along, you've got Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emeritus, who is yelling at reporters over January 6th stuff. Here you go.
Why did you refuse the National Guard on January 6th?
Shut up. I did not refuse the National Guard. The president didn't send it. Why are you coming here with Republican talking points as if you're a serious journalist?
The American people want to know. We still have questions.
If it's so, I mean, again, you can answer the question and just say, no, that didn't happen. But if you're going to yell at a reporter, I have not heard any reporters actually go up and ask Nancy that kind of on the front before. And again, Pelosi's also admitted it on camera, on the record. So, yeah, Americans do, in fact, have questions about this. It's a fair question to ask, given the video footage that we have. You know, it's not Sora AI footage. It's not Martin Luther King Jr. telling the crowd about a Jet 2 holiday. It's footage from January 6th in 2021, which, again, Democrats told me was a really big deal. So Nancy, in what appears to be a blazer made of a 1960s couch cushion that has more lime in it than a tequila. Anywho, moving on. Mike Johnson, the vagina hat party, went down to yell at Mike Johnson's office because he's not swearing in some Democrat-appointed representative. By the way, these are Congress people. You're currently paying for these people. Well, I mean, you're actually currently not paying these people. They're all angry. You know, strong woman, hear me roar, swear her in. Swear her in. It's better than singing. I'll give them that. Swear her in. Swear her in. Swear her in. Swear her in. Wait a minute. That one dude who's a congressman, I know him. Is he wearing like makeup to go see Mike Johnson? I don't think Mike Johnson's going to like you back. I appreciate the get up and the setup, but I'm afraid you. I don't think that fits for you. They're protesting in favor of Adelita Grijalva, who I again is just not being appointed right now because of the government shutdown. It's such a goofy situation. There's a lot of other scandals currently racking through the Democrat Party. Abigail Spanberger, the gubernatorial candidate in Virginia, is in hot water because she's on camera saying that she's totally okay with assisted suicide. And even if a doctor doesn't believe in suicide, he shouldn't be allowed to stand in the way of somebody killing themselves.
I support, and I would support legislation that legalizes the right to die with dignity of a person's choosing. And that would include allowing for medical providers to provide prescriptions for life-ending prescriptions. In the cases of someone who's deemed medically competent to make that decision, mentally competent to make that decision.
Canada had a piece in their legislation on medical assisted suicide, and it should just be noted, even though Canada's law also said that they have to be competent to make that decision, Canada's essentially just allowing people with severe mental illness to just kill themselves willy-nilly. Every state in the world that has an assisted suicide program either has essentially fell into this policy, or it's a Muslim country and they just push people off of bridges.
I oppose the ability of religious institutions to put their religious-based ideas on individuals and their healthcare choices and options. I believe that we should trust people to have relationships with their healthcare providers that lead them to make strong decisions based on their medical practices. And I do not believe that people should have the option to allow their own personal beliefs to dictate the type of medical care that they are providing their patients.
There you go. Screw the Hippocratic Oath from Abigail Spanberger, Democrat candidate in Virginia. She doesn't believe a person should be allowed to say, you know what, as a Christian, I don't believe in suicide. I believe that you have a soul, and that allowing you to commit suicide is, I don't think that, again, that's homicide. Participating in homicide, which, you know, I guess given that Jay Jones, the Attorney General, given his text messages, he clearly believes in assisted homicide. I guess that it's quite the match made in hell. Los Angeles County has now declared a state of emergency. Why? Because ICE is arresting illegal immigrants.
LA County has declared a state of emergency over the immigration raids. The Board of Supervisors voted today. Board members say the raids are preventing people from going to work and forcing some businesses to close.
Why would raids on individuals here illegally force businesses to close? Because federal law states that in order to be employed, you have to pass E-Verify. You know, you actually have to verify you're a citizen of the United States or you have a work visa to be here. So why would people be afraid to go to work? See, on my driver's license, it indicates that I'm supposed to be here. You know, my passport indicates I'm supposed to be here. Amazing.
The emergency allows the board to look at enacting an eviction moratorium and other protections for people impacted by the raids. And this news just coming into our newsroom will
That's incredible, by the way. Screwing over like landlords, essentially, suggesting that. So great, incredible. Again, reminder, there was no emergency declared by the Los Angeles County Council over individuals trying to get building permits to rebuild after the Palisades in the Los Angeles and the Hollywood fires. But, illegal immigrants being deported, oh gosh, that's got to stop. Last but certainly not least, this evening before we send the radio crew off, a federal grand jury has indicted a Mexican national, Juan Espinoza Martinez, for putting a $10,000 hit out on U.S. Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bavino. The indictment alleges that Martinez, an illegal immigrant from Mexico, used a facility of interstate commerce, mainly an Apple Model 16 phone, with the intent that a murder be committed. So, Mexican cartels putting out hits on federal law enforcement fit right in with Antifa. We're going to send the radio crew off. See you guys real soon. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right. Last but certainly not least, I want to get just a couple of mail time things out of the way. So first of all, very, very good question from Captain Patriot, who also sent a super chat in of $5. You don't have to do that to get a question into mail time. Again, really appreciate the tip. That's very kind of you. That's not required. He says, wouldn't it be a conflict of interest for the federal judge to rule on a case regarding firing federal employees or paying certain federal employees if it would affect her paycheck too? So the answer to that is no, but not because it's moral or ethical or lawful for the judge to rule in this case. And the reason that is the situation here, that it's not a conflict of interest, is that she just has no authority whatsoever to make this ruling right now. So I can't say, for example, if I suggest that someone needs to be arrested and tried for a crime, I don't have a conflict of interest because I'm not the judge ruling in that case. I don't have the authority to actually charge someone as a judge or convict somebody. This judge doesn't have the authority to do that. So that's that particular question. As for Kiki Lee, I hear Tony is a pilot. Do me a solid, ask him if he'll throw me out of a plane in 2 years. Bucket list, need to overcome my fear of heights by falling a few thousand feet on my 50th birthday. I have had the wonderful opportunity of jumping out of a plane before and doing a little of the airborne skydiving stuff. The very first time I jumped out of a plane, I peed my pants. And it dried on the way down because air moves rather quickly through you at that altitude. But would I push you out of a plane? Sure. If I have to push you out of the plane and be the pilot, the plane's probably going to lurch as I lean over to give you the shove. So we'll consider other options. Next question. How is Mamdani doing? You don't talk about him that much. Yeah, I don't usually concern myself with the goofy musings of radical jihadist communists in the lap of luxury by socialists. Usually they have to at least make it to, Congress for me to care. But I do have one clip of Zoran Mamdani going extra stupid. He was asked by, I believe in an interview with Fox News today, if he believes that Hamas, now that the ceasefire deal has been signed and they have agreed to, should they disarm? Because again, Israel's given like 2,000 prisoners of war back to Hamas, and Hamas has given back the living Israeli hostages. Mamdani just straight up refused to answer the question. It was a really weird moment. Check it out.
Into one that's affordable for each and every New Yorker.
But okay, I want to get to that, absolutely. But do you believe that Hamas should lay down their weapons and leave the leadership in Gaza?
I believe that any future here in New York City is one that we have to make sure that's affordable for all. And as it pertains to Israel and Palestine, that we have to ensure that there is peace. And that is the future that we have to fight for.
Okay, so two fun things here. Obviously, he didn't answer the question. And he didn't answer the question because he doesn't want Hamas to give up their arms. He wants Hamas to win. And he wants Israel to be cleansed of Jews and Christians, because that's what Hamas does. Now, in the meantime, also Hamas wants to cleanse any other group that wants to reign in Palestine or Gaza as well as an entity, because they're literally lining up firing squads, shooting fellow militants in the Israeli-Gaza war. So Arabic Muslims that don't get along with Hamas, they also want to kill. So, telling, of course, Now, why bring this up? After all, he's a mayoral candidate. He wants to talk about New York stuff. Well, of course, he just said he wants there to be peace in the region, won't answer the question. Mamdani has already made a huge point to say he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu for genocide and war crimes if he sets foot in New York, if he was the mayor of New York City. So he's already issued foreign policy arguments on this.
You won't say that Hamas should lay down their arms and give up leadership in Gaza.
I don't really have opinions about the future of Hamas and Israel beyond the question of justice and safety. And
I guess terrorist groups laying down their arms isn't an issue of justice and safety?
The fact that anything has to abide by international law. And that applies to Hamas, that applies to the Israeli military, applies to anyone you could ask me about.
Okay.
I love that. I really enjoy just the letting the cat out of the bag as if it weren't already out of the bag. Producer Nick?
Well, to him, justice is Sharia and safety is concerning humans. And to Muslims, Jews are not human. So there's his justice and safety.
Excellent. Excellent stuff. Oh, by the way, I do want to make this this clear because we did get a question about it regarding who does and doesn't get paid in a shutdown. Yeah, members of Congress do, in fact, still cash in their paychecks during the shutdown. I thought that had changed in the 2010s, but no, they do still, in fact, get paid. So I'm really, really interested to see if the judge in question, Judge Susan Ilston, who looks like any angry, old, bitter, liberal woman, you know what I'm talking about. I'm interested to see if she tries to prevent Trump from paying the troops, but at the same time preventing the government from taking emergency cost-cutting measures. You really can't have it both ways there. And speaking of no longer having it both ways, individuals who claim to be bisexual or multiple genders, according to multiple studies, are trending down in the United States. Fewer people by the year, spiking during the Biden administration, are identifying as non-binary. And of the 37 kinds of genders. Why? Well, not just because you can't have it both ways, but because it was the social fad that conservatives argued that it was always. Always. It was the social fad. We knew it was, in fact, a social fad of affirmation of a mental illness, of pressuring kids to admit they were some super duper ultra different gender. I mean, are you really surprised? I'm not really surprised. I mean, when you have goofballs who are, let's say, the spokesperson, because they're certainly not a spokesman at this point, running around the country in their weird outfits and such, claiming to be normal when people like J.D. Vance are actually the weird one, it just really doesn't land. And I'm not really sure that people should be surprised about this. Producer Nick?
I mean, when you just can't be surprised when you make it socially beneficial to have a certain identity, that identity then becomes a fad.
Very, very true. By the way, here again, just to remind you of the individuals made spokesman.
It feels impossible for me to make this video for some reason because it's so emotionally charged right now, but I have to tell you some of the good things that are happening. I've been talking to my doctors and my therapist a lot.
You don't say.
About how I am more of a woman than I initially anticipated.
More than a woman! More of a woman. Let's go, girls. I mean, like, what does more of a woman mean? I just broke out into Shania Twain this morning. I started arguing, and I didn't know what the problem was, and I just argued anyway.
I've been hitting a lot more stuff in the car than I thought I would originally.
I've started taking longer and longer to get ready every day, and I've wondered why that is, and it's because I'm more of a woman. Incredible.
I don't know why that feels like such a huge thing to say. I don't want to leave behind anybody in the non-binary community.
Wait a minute. Oh, the non-binary community decreasing. There you go. I love it. I love it when a plan comes together.
I will never forego that label. It will always feel like something accurate to me. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Why is this such a big thing? I have felt...
Sorry, I just want to point out, Fabio with the female librarian glasses and the 5 o'clock shadow and
go get some wax strips, man.
Yikes, buddy. I mean, they sell like the laser hair things on Amazon now that'll at least get rid of the shadow. I mean, good,
something for the male pattern baldness would help too, to really make that female hair come back in.
I don't even know. I don't know if the big kahuna himself could surf the waves on that forehead. Good, sweet grace.
More of a call than ever to get in touch with who I truly am, and it's just coming out as a woman. Every single time I see myself in the future, I see myself as a woman, as a mother. I see myself turning into my mom, the good parts and the parts I don't want to turn into. Like, I'm
You're breaking down into tears for no reason. I'm starting to believe the argument.
We can all relate to that. Oh God, this is such a disaster. I wanted to make a happy video. I swear to God, this is good. I had my first, where are my glasses? I can't even see you. This is going horribly. Sit there for a second. I had my first appointment where I switched from estrogen pills to injections. And
oh, here it is. I feel like a woman a lot more lately. I can't figure out why. The pills that I was taking swapped for directly intravenous injections of the hormone, so that there's no, as you know, my fellow medical man, when you take pills relating to hormonal affectation, you lose part of the hormonal receptors due to stomach acid, due to water storage and loss, things getting absorbed into the wrong stuff, things getting sucked into the fat, for example. If it's a guy taking it, some of it comes out in sexual discharge. There's a lot of reasons why, if you take hormones orally, it doesn't quite just go to the right places. Man, but if you slap that right into the wrist and you inject that right into the thigh like an EpiPen from hell, boy oh boy, you'll be feeling like a woman. I love it. Well, I'm getting a couple of messages. We're going to get emails on that one. Not from the non-binary community. Apparently, they're becoming a thing of the past. So that said, producer Nick, any final thoughts on hormonal treatments and the grand success they've obviously been for our medical institutions and patients?
Take the hormones that your body needs if you need that, and you'll be a lot happier.
Unless you're in Virginia, in which case, says Abigail Spanberger, ask your doctor to kill yourself. That's not a really good campaign slogan. Don't recommend that. I recommend instead proven medical treatment, not what some liberal white lady says is the cure for her to feel noble. Those important messages said. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Same great time, same great place. Might have a couple of updates from the Chicago side of things. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.